Welcome to Learn Commerce PU online classes. Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.
Hello students, welcome to 2nd PUC English online classes. In today's class, let us discuss the lesson I believe that books will never disappear, the continuation of that. In the last class, we studied about George Burgess, his excellent idea or theme of writing the book. Robert Alfino, the interviewer who asked George Louis Burgess that whether he was interested in writing the history of book. For that he had answered that at the age of 83 years he cannot write, and already Spengler in his book Decline of the West he had already attempted to write. Then Alfino continues to ask about the writing of a book, and in one of the book George Burgess he had referred Bernard Shaw's words. They are like every book worth being reread has been written by the Spirit. These words of Bernard Shaw. Bernard Shaw is an Irish playwright. His words he referred in the book. So about that Alfino asked Burgess. What is the answer given by Burgess? Let us see. Alfino asked Burgess, in one of your essays you quote the words of Bernard Shaw. Every book worth being reread has been written by the Spirit. Burgess answers, oh yes, I completely concur with that notion. Since a book goes beyond its author's intention, the author's intention is a meager thing, a fallible thing. In a book, in every book, there is a need for something more, which is always mysterious. When we read an ancient book, it is as though we were reading all time that has passed from the day it was written to our present day. A book can be full of errors. We can reject its author's opinion, disagree with him or her, but the book always retains something sacred, something mortal, something magical which brings happiness. So here, what Bernard Shaw wrote? Bernard Shaw wrote that every book worth being reread has been written by the Spirit. Every book while writing, that must be written with the Spirit. Every book worth being reread. Again and again there is a urge to read the book, and that kind of books has been written by the Spirit. The Spirit in the sense the author's intention or the author's way of writing the book. One should feel that something a pleasant or something truth in the book. For that Burgess says, yes, I of course agree, I concur with that. Concur in the sense completely agree with that notion. Since book goes beyond its author's intention. When the reader reads the book beyond goes author's intention. Author might have some intention, but while reading the reader, it can be taken by the reader in a different way. It can be appreciated or it can be criticized by the reader. In many ways it is accepted. It can be accepted positively, it can be accepted negatively, or it can be treated as a useless thing also. But the author's intention is a meager thing. Meager in the sense it is silly or a small thing, a fallible thing. Fallible thing in the sense it can be a mistake also. In a book, in every book there is a need for something more. There is a need for something more in the sense which is always mysterious. That is always mysterious. We cannot say how the book plays or how the book can be accepted by the reader, how the reader reads it, or how the reader while reading he feels, that cannot be said. and it is called, or it is treated as a mysterious process. When we read an ancient book, it is as though we were reading all time that has passed from the day it was written to our present day. You might have read some of the books, for example novels or the history or the epics you might have read. While reading these books, how do you feel if you have read? How do you feel? Or while you are reading the stories, how do you feel? You feel or you get a kind of picture into your mind, right? While reading the story, you get scene by scene some pictures. For example, if there is in the story, if it is written as there is a king, there is a queen and there is a palace, so all the imagination comes to your mind, right? The same way here, the imagination or writer, though the writer writes the book, while reading the reader feels, or reader feels that, or he enjoys, or he imagines the situation. So it brings us a kind of a scene in front of us. So while reading the ancient book, what happens to us? While reading, as though we were reading all time that has passed from the day it was written to our present day. So we read the book as if it is written all the time that has passed from the day it was written to our present day. So from the past, whatever we happened, that comes to our mind, or that comes in front of the scene or the screen of our mind or the eyes. A book can be full of errors. We can reject its author's opinion, disagree with him or her, but the book always retains something sacred. We may agree or we may disagree with the book. We may complain or we may hate the book, but the book contains something sacred, something mortal, something magical which brings happiness. Though it may have the false, or it may be full of errors, whatever it may be, but it has something sacred, mortal and magical, and that brings happiness to us. That takes us to the world of that book. Then Alfino asked about poetry. Next his question was about poetry. Burgess, what is poetry? How would you define it? So here Robert Alfino asked the question regarding the poetry, and he asked Louis Burgess to define the poetry. How he will define the poetry? Let us see. Burgess, I believe that poetry is something so intimate, so essential that it cannot be defined without oversimplifying it. It would be like attempting to define the color yellow, love and the fall of leaves in the autumn. I believe that poetry is the aesthetic act, that poetry is not the poem. For the poem may be nothing more than a series of symbols. Poetry, I believe, is the poetic act that takes place when the poet writes it, when the reader reads it. And it always happens in a slightly different manner. When the poetic act takes place, it seems to me that we become aware of it. Poetry is a magical, mysterious and unexplainable, although not incomprehensible event. If one doesn't feel the poetic event upon reading it, the poet has failed. So this is the description of poetry. What Burgess is saying, poetry is something intimate, something friendly, something close, something so essential, it's very important that it cannot be defined without oversimplifying. Without oversimplifying in the sense, without in defining or without explaining the situation. So here something so intimate, in the sense it's close, it is friendly. Why? Because some songs or some poems, they soothe, and while hearing those poems or while reading those poems, we feel something is truth, or even in our life something has happened like that. If you read Wordsworth poetry, if you read William Blake's, if you read William Shakespeare, what happens? When you read Kuvempu, what happens? You feel it is when the poetry is read by you or anyone, they feel or they will come to know what happened, and even they can relate that and they can realize, oh yes. For example, we have a poem, Heaven if you are not here on earth. So Kuvempu writes the poem here, and when the reader reads it, reader realizes, oh yes, without apart from this earth, where is the heaven, right? Till there that notion might not be come to anyone's mind. And when the poet he expresses in the poem, and when the reader reads it, definitely one can realize or one can enlighten with that idea. And here it is said that poetry is so essential and it cannot be defined without oversimplifying it. Here it must be described with a situation briefly, or entirely it must be explained. It would be like attempting to define the color yellow, love, and the fall of leaves in the autumn. So defining poetry is not an easy thing. It's a difficult thing. It's a difficult like explaining the color yellow. Yellow in the sense what? Color yellow. In the autumn season, the color becomes yellow. In the nature, you might have seen the nature, or if you see the tree, in one season the leaves of the trees become yellow, and after that it falls, and then the new spring comes and that arises. And also here defining the love. How? What is love? How the love born? Okay, this is a mysterious. The question is, there is no exact answer to that. We can define how we understand or how we experience. With that notion we can define, but exactly nobody can define the love because it is different from one person to another person's experience. Then also fall of leaves in the autumn. Why the leaves fall in the autumn? Why not in other season? So these are the very mysterious questions, and these are very interesting questions also. So there is no exact answer to these questions. Similarly, there is no exact answer for or exact definition to the poetry. I believe that poetry is the aesthetic act. What is an aesthetic act? It is concerned with beauty and art, understanding of beautiful things. So poetry is nothing but aesthetic act, understanding the beautiful things and experiencing it and presenting it. The poetry is not the poem, for the poem may be nothing more than a series of symbols. So here poetry or poem is nothing but more than symbols. There while reading the poetry you might have seen the symbols. Symbols or metaphors are used to compare. Then only one can write the poetry. For example, already we have read the food from its child. So there the symbol, the foot is a symbol. Okay, the streets, ladders, etc. that is the symbol. The butterfly, the apple, they are all the symbols, right? So here writing poetry in the sense using the symbols in a proper way in order to convey the feelings of the poet to the reader. So using the proper symbols or proper metaphors to convey the feelings to the reader. That is called poetry. Poetry, I believe, is the poetic act that takes place when the poet writes it, when the reader reads it. And when this poetic act that takes place, the poetic act takes place when the writer writes it and when the reader reads it. When the poet writes it, he feels that situation or the subject in front of him. For example, think that you are a poet and you are enjoying the nature. While watching the nature, you feel that to write something, and while feeling something to write, you take a pen and start writing, and you enjoy the scenery, you enjoy the breeze, you enjoy the beauty of flowers, and you write, and you bring the symbols together and you write the poetry. The same feeling must be felt by the reader while reading the poem. While reading the poems or poetry of Wordsworth or William Shakespeare, how you feel that even you are in that situation itself. The same way here the poet must write, and while reading that poetry, even the reader must experience the same feeling or same experience. When the poetic act takes place, it seems to me that we become aware of it. When the poetic act takes place in us, then we become aware of it. Poetry is a magical, it's a mysterious and unexplainable. So it is magical, it's like magic. It happens, you cannot say when it happens, where it happens. Okay? And it is mysterious, there is a mystery, how it happens, how the poet feels to write that. So it's a God given talent, you cannot study about that. It's a mysterious thing and also unexplainable. You cannot explain all the kinds, all the time. Although not incomprehensible, although it is not impossible to understand, you can understand, it is not difficult to understand. If one doesn't feel the poetic event upon reading it, the poet has failed. If the poet's success that is remain or that is lie in the reader's expression. If the reader doesn't feel that poetic act, then the writer's or the poet's attempt is a failure or it's a useless thing. Then Alfino asked the next question using the precise words in poetry. Burgess, what is important in the art of poetry is finding the precise words. So here he is asking whether in poetry is it important to find the precise words. Precise words in the sense exact words must be used in poetry. So it must touch the feeling of a human. It must touch the heart of the reader while reading that. Simply if you write the poetry, it doesn't look as if it is a poem. For that Burgess says, to a great extent, yes, of course, to a great extent it is important to find the precise words by the poet. Those precise words are what elicit emotion. I always remember that wonderful line in a poem by Emily Dickinson which can exemplify this. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. The idea is banal. The idea of dust, the dust of death, we will all be dust one day, is a cliche. But what surprises is the phrase gentlemen and ladies, which gives the magic and poetic quality. If she had written men and women, it would have failed as poetry. It would have been trivial, but finding the precise words, she wrote, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. So here Louis Burgess, he is giving one example how to use, what is the use of using the precise or exact words in the poetry. So here he is referring Emily Dickinson's words from her poetry, and he is saying that he always remember that Emily Dickinson's words, and with that example he can explain why it is important to find the precise words while writing the poetry. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. Here Emily Dickinson, she had used in one of her writing that to refer the dead people, she had used this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies, referring the summer she was saying in the autumn season. The idea is banal. The idea is banal in the sense it's a very ordinary and it is not an interesting idea what that every gentleman, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. Yes, this idea is banal. Banal in the sense it's not very ordinary, or it is an uninteresting, not interested. The idea of dust, the dust of death, we will all be dust one day, is a cliche. So what is cliche? Cliche is a phrase or an idea that has been used so often that it no longer has much meaning and is nothing interesting. So it is not an interesting thing because everyone will become dust one or other day. So it is not an interesting thing, but the way of referring that, it is an interesting. But what surprises is the phrase gentlemen and ladies, which gives the magic and poetic quality. If she had written men and women, it can be generally taken. If it is referred as gentlemen and ladies, then it will be more effective, it is said. So while giving the speech, for example, Mahilere mattu Mahaniyare, so there is a kind of there is a weightage to that, okay, while giving the speech. Makkale, or if hengasare mattu gandasare, is that looks very attractive. Mahilere Mahaniyare, it looks very attractive, right? So here the same thing he is writing. So instead of using men and women, it is better to, or it is magical or something, it is poetic, using gentlemen and ladies. It would have failed as poetry. It would have been trivial in the sense not important or serious. It would have become not serious, become trivial. But finding the precise word, she wrote, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies. This quiet dust refers to the bodies of men and women. This quiet dust is of this quiet dust was a gentleman and ladies. So here, by giving the example of Emily Dickinson, he is explaining what's the use or why it is important to find the precise words. Then Alfino continues asking, you have said that metaphors exist from our very beginnings. Could you expound on that concept, Burgess? So here, finding the precise words or finding the symbols, it is important, he said. And finding the metaphors, you have said that metaphors exist from our every beginnings, from the universe itself, okay, from our very beginning in the sense from the beginning of the universe itself, the metaphors that exist. What are the metaphors? Two things have same quality, so they are compared. Could you expound on that concept, Burgess? What is Burgess's answer? Let us see. Yes, certainly. I believe that metaphors, if they are truly metaphors, exist from the beginning of time, but we express them differently. I have occasionally thought of reducing all metaphors to 5 or 6, which seem to me to be the essential metaphors. So he is saying, yes, of course, from the beginning of the universe there are metaphors and they are taken by the individual differently, and he is categorizing these metaphors into 6. What are those metaphors? Well, time and river, life and dreams, death and sleep, stars and eyes, flowers and women. These would be, I believe, the essential metaphors that are found in all literature. And then there are others that are whimsical. I believe that the poet's task is to discover metaphors even though they may already exist. So here what he says, yes, of course these metaphors are available, and it is the capacity of the poet to find those metaphors. So here he is classifying some of the metaphors. Which are they? Time and river. So here Burgess is saying time and river. Time is compared to river. Both have the same qualities. How? The time passes. It doesn't wait for anyone. The same way river, it doesn't wait for anyone. It keeps on flowing and it does its own duty as the time does. Whatever it may happen, it may be raining, it may be whatever it may be, the time passes the same way the river. Life and dreams. Life, it's a full of happiness, it's a full of sadness, it's a mixture of both the good and bad, happiness or sadness, etc. Even the dreams, sometimes we may get good dreams, sometimes we get bad dreams or terrifying dreams. So here life and dreams, it's a colorful thing, okay, life and dreams. Death and sleep, they have the same quality. Death in the sense there is no movement, there is no activity, anything is found. Here sleep is also like that. When you sleep, whatever happens around you, will you come to know? No, right? So then sleeping is like a death only. If anybody wants to experience the death, don't commit suicide, but sleep, it's the sleep. In the sense I am telling just as a joke. Here dying in the sense it's like a sleeping. So we are every day we are experiencing the death. So that is the sleep. So no need of don't try to experience the death by committing suicide or anything. If you sleep, then that is the experience of death. Stars and eyes. So stars are or the eyes are compared to the stars. Eyes and stars are they are taken as a metaphor. Why? There is a kind of sparkle or there is a kind of shining in the stars. The same thing you can find in the eyes also, and you can find the mood of a human in the eyes or anyone. Flower and women. The flower and women. How the flower is sensitive, the same way even the woman. You might have experienced, okay. And here once the flower is crushed, it will be spoiled. And the same way here the life of women, once it is crushed, it will be spoiled. The same way here it is women is sensitive, emotional, etc. like the flower, it's like sensitive. These would be, I believe, the essential metaphors that are found in all literatures. In all literature, not only in English or Kannada or Hindi, whatever it may be, in all kind of literature, these metaphors are common. And then there are others that are whimsical. Even other metaphors are found, but they are unusual. Whimsical in the sense they are unusual. I believe that the poet's task is to discover metaphors even though they may already exist. Here the poet's task is to discover the metaphors. Though they are present, he has to discover that and he has to connect with his poetry. Then as a continuation, Alfino asks Burgess, there are people who speak of the disappearance of books and they assert that modern developments in communications will replace them with something more dynamic that will require less time than reading. What do you think of that? So here the question is asked about the existence or the life of the book. Here it is said, there are people who speak of the disappearance of book. One or the other day it is said that the books will disappear because of the modern developments, because of these electric gadgets or modern technologies, etc. It is said that those gadgets or those developments in communication will replace them with something more dynamic that will require less time than reading. So of course, right, now whatever information if we want also, if we type in the mobile enough, the meaning or whatever information we want, that comes to our comes in front of our eyes. Wherever you go, you need not to carry all the books along with you. If you carry your cell phone, that is enough, right? So because of this, it is said that the books will disappear. What is the answer given by Burgess for that question? I believe that books will never disappear, but he had a strong faith that books will never disappear. Why? What is the reason? Let us see. It is impossible that will happen. Among the many inventions of man, the book without a doubt is the most astounding. All the others are extension of our bodies. The telephone, for example, is the extension of our voice. The telescope and the microscope extension of our sight. The sword and the plow are extension of our arms. Only the book is an extension of our imagination and our memory. So, it is said by Burgess that books are the astounding inventions of a man. Astounding in the sense a surprising, unimaginable, okay, it's a surprising, it's a wonderful invention of a man. Why? Because all other inventions, for example, telephone is the extension of our voice. You just imagine about this telephone. If you are here and if when you dial in your mobile, you can speak a person who is in the another corner of the world. So, you can connect people from far away. So, it is the extension of our voice. Then you have microscope, you have also telescope, etc. To the telescope you can see the planet or whatever is found in the space, right? And also you can see even a minute object by microscope. So, that is called what? Extension of our sight. And plow and this sword, they all the extension of our hand, which we cannot do by our hand, cannot cut by our hand. We use the sword or we use the plow to dig the land or anything, okay. So, here these are all the extension of our bodies, but books, they are the extension of our imagination and memory. So, whatever we feel, if we record it in the book, it will remain forever, it will not be destroyed. We have the history in the form of books itself, right. Well, Alfino asks, well, you state in a memorable passage that literature is a dream. Now, he speaks about literature. In the previous stanza, in the previous answer, Burgess had explained why the books will not disappear, and now he is speaking about the literature, and it is said by Burgess, it is true, literature is a dream, a controlled dream. Now I believe that we owe literature almost everything we are and what we have been, also what we will be. Our past is nothing but a sequence of dreams. What difference can there be between dreaming and remembering the past? Books are the great memory of all centuries. Their function therefore is irreplaceable. If books disappear, surely history would disappear and surely man would disappear. So, what happened here? What's the answer? How Burgess he defined his statement that books will never disappear? Here it is when he asked about the literature, and he what Alfino, you state in a memorable passage that literature is a dream. You are saying that literature is a dream. How it is a dream? Tell me, he asked. For that Burgess he replied, yes, of course literature is a dream, isn't it? When you read the story, when you read the poem, don't you get a picture in your mind? Yes, of course, it is a controlled dream. Now I believe that we owe literature almost everything we are and what we have been, also what we will be. So, in the literature what we produce our past. If you read the epics, or if you read the Ramayana, Mahabharata, whatever it may be, it is the presentation of past, isn't it? When we read that, we get a kind of imagination, or we get all the scenes in front of the screen or in front of our eyes, right? So, it is a controlled dream. So, whatever information is there, that while reading we get all the scenes in front of us. What difference can there be between dreaming and remembering the past? So, think about your past. So isn't it like a scene, or isn't it like a dream? So here Burgess is asking, what's the difference between dream and remembering the past? Books are the great memory of all centuries. So to remember the past, the books are the sources and they are the memories of all century. The books have memories of all century. Their function therefore is irreplaceable. You cannot replace the function of the book. If books disappear, surely history would disappear and surely man would disappear. So finally what happens? If the books disappear, Burgess is saying that definitely all the history or the human history will be disappear, and at last even the human beings will disappear, because there will be no entity for or no proof for the existence of a human being. So here it is said that by Louis Burgess, that is, books will never disappear, and if the books will disappear, surely history will disappear, and we cannot achieve in our presence without our past or without the history. So this is what Louis Burgess he tells in his lesson or in his interview especially. And here Alfino he asked Louis Burgess about his early education, about his mother, about writing the books, about the theme of books, about the author of the books, about the poetry, and about the literature, and about the metaphors. So these are the main things discussed in this lesson. Dear students, read the lesson carefully and try to answer the questions given in the reader by yourself. Don't confine your answers to the 4 to 5 lines. Try to extend the answers by referring the reader. Thank you for watching.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.